Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Today we have on the show Trantor, the head of Etherex. Trantor, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
For those that haven't heard of Etherex, please tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, sure. So Etherex is the leading decentralized exchange on Linea, so for the Linea ecosystem. And we really use the X33 tokenomics, which is sort of the upgrade to VE33 that many people have heard of, to provide essentially a full MetaDex experience for the Linea ecosystem. So I know we'll dive into all that good stuff, but yeah, we are the largest DEX on Linea by a long shot. And if you're looking at metrics on things like DEX or your favorite DeFi app, you'll notice between 85 and 95% of all volume is coming on Etherex. So happy to explain all that to everybody today and to talk through what we do.
Yeah, let's definitely get into that. Tell us first of all, I actually haven't spoken with any applications that are built on the Linea ecosystem, and so this is the first. But obviously, I've heard about it, but know very little about it. And so during the call, or during this episode, we'd love to hear about it, and like maybe we can start with like why you chose the Linea ecosystem.
That's a good question, and I think I can even answer a little bit more. So I'm maybe the joke whenever I do these panels is I always have a spicy take on something, and not because I say stuff that's too much out of school, but I'll try to say it as honestly as possible. One of the reasons you don't know many builders on Linea is because Linea really died after a short period of time. So Linea launched, a couple of years ago now, with great technology and a lot of fanfare. Had a lot of interest across DeFi and was really growing, and then really just faded from there. Faded down to the point where at some stages, in the peak quiet, um, we were looking at no more than between 4 and 8 million a day in total volume on the chain, which is basically an indication of a dead chain. And so you didn't know too many builders because a lot of the big players hadn't come. So we weren't seeing Aave, we weren't seeing Euler, we weren't seeing Morpho, we weren't seeing some of the bigger dexes, etc. And so at that stage, I think that's one of the reasons why Linea has sort of been on people's radars and then disappeared off their radars at the same time. So for us, we initially, joined the Linea ecosystem as part of our strategy in what is called like the Kingdom series of dexes. Back basically just after Linea launched. And at that stage, we were the Nile. So those of you who have heard of the Nile DEX as part of an Egyptian theme, we had launched with more of the classic VE NFT structure that Ramsey's really built out on top of. So it's sort of the leading VE33 technologies. And we're competing there along with everybody else. But again, along with the rest of the ecosystem, most of the projects in Linea were really bleeding value continuously as user interest just died away. But we can get to the next part of the bullish story, and forgive me if I just keep talking because I get too excited. The next sort of big part for us was understanding that Linea was waking up and getting ready to go. And a lot of that had to do with Consensys, Joe Lubin personally, and the Ethereum story, which again, I'm happy to talk to maybe straight after this part. But what we had learnt as the kingdom was that foundation alignment and using the proper metadex play, in other words, aligning your key decks with the foundation, with the chain itself, is the surefire way to scale an ecosystem. And so, in partnership with Linea, we rebranded to Etherex, which has a long history as well as a name, to launch the DEX. We also use the upgraded X33 tokenomics, which basically takes away a lot of that friction, much better for users, to launch Etherex. So for us, it was why we launched here. One, we believe in the tech and the long-term storyline of Linea and Consensys. It's going to be here for multiple cycles, unlike most chains. So it says a long-term view, which is good. And then also because we knew we had that foundation alignment, which after many years in the trenches, we've come to realize is the key component to building a successful application, in particular when it comes to DEXs, because you can have effective alignment and healthy liquidity. So that's why we're sort of building here, because we know we've got that alignment and we believe in the bull case of Linea more broadly.
Got it. Now, during that time, I mean, it sounds like you kind of went through a journey of there's some in, things weren't as sure, and there was some kind of it was a bumpy road. What was going through your mind at that during that time around Etherex, or before he was even called Etherex, and what should you continue doing this? Like, tell us kind
Yeah,
of what
great
was
question.
going on in your mind.
Great question. I think every builder within the ecosystem was wondering the same thing, which is why some builders left. And don't get me wrong, there are the hardcore groups who've stuck around and some fantastic communities in Linea, and I'll give them a shout out later on as required. But A lot of builders and a lot of deep capital just left the Linea ecosystem because it was just so quiet. There was no new activity happening. And from us, from a DEX perspective, we were looking at, okay, obviously we're here to support volumes, but if the volumes are so low, then our users aren't, they're not profiting, the system isn't working. How do we continue? For us, we have a number of DEXs on different chains, and the focus essentially just had to move to some of the other chains until we could work out what the plan moving forward was. What that has meant is, I think if you're bullish on the ecosystem, is that we weren't just here waiting to suckle on the teat of Linea and Consensys. Really, we're more about now we build and we get things moving, and we were still iterating and building either on Linea or alternatively on other chains. And so for those of you users who are familiar with Sonic, for example, Shadow on Sonic really pioneered the new X33 tokenomics and is the largest DEX there in particular by volume. And that is same team, same group, same technology. So for those of you who know that technology, it's the same here with us with a couple of revisions to really just continue to evolve the model. But a highly effective model, and we continue to build and continue to learn. So that's kind of how we went through that process. And that's, again, why we're very confident that we didn't sit idly just hoping for things to turn around. We really built and kept building.
Well, it sounds like you really owned your fate and you decided
Yeah,
to,
that's a fair
push
statement. That's a
forward.
fair statement. Yeah,
No,
yeah,
that's great. So organizationally, so you've mentioned Joe Lubin and Consensys, and then maybe help us understand like the organization behind Linea. There's
yeah,
Kingdom. Like,
sure.
tell us about that and how
So it's a bit of a
Consensys
mix. Good
and
question.
yeah,
Good
go ahead.
question. It can be a little bit confusing for people because it's a corporate structure. So I know Coinbase is as well, and so there's a corporate entity that deals with Base. So for those of you who are familiar with the Base ecosystem, for broadly speaking, think of Consensys as as the large, the big company. They have an offshoot slash supporting arm, and the relationship there is less clear to me than I guess someone from SharpLink could tell you. But there's clearly the SharpLink SBET relationship, as personified by Joe Lubin and Joe Shalom and their partnership with SharpLink, right? So that's that digital asset treasury. So we'll park that part for the moment. Within Consensys, they've got a suite of products. Infura, which are big infrastructure sort of project, really backbone. You've got MetaMask, clearly, as another large piece to it, and then you've got Linea. So those become the three big elements of the Consensys ecosystem. Whereas last year they weren't necessarily working so well together, this year as things come, as things are really working and sort of melding forward, and Joe Lubin is more involved directly, and the company is able to really take a stand and really lead for Ethereum. Those three elements, but in particular MetaMask and Linea, are really coming to the fore as key components of Consensys. So Linea, think of that as a direct offshoot of Consensys and as the primary L2 that supports the broader Consensys vision. And then MetaMask, clearly, the most popular wallet, plenty of developments going on there. And in particular, in the last sort of few months, they're really pushing forward to maintain their edge as the best wallet out there. And so the partnership there is what's being built on now to move forward. So consider Consensys the big company. They've got the infrastructure within Fura, and then they've got these two products which work very closely together, are now also being supported by SharpLink and SBET and the speculation there. So hopefully that answers it,
Yeah,
because there is the corporate entity that is, and then there's the L2 that works directly with it.
yeah. I know the MetaMask folks. I know Taylor pretty well. We go back to 2016, I think. She's like an
Cool.
OG. I don't know if you know
Yeah.
Taylor. Um,
Not well, no, just the name.
yeah, no, she's great. Um, that's cool. Let's get into Etherex. Tell us kind of like what was the gap? Like, when you first thought of Etherex, you and the team, like what was the gap that you identified that you wanted to fill?
Sure. So Linea has an entirety of Consensys, right? I think anybody who's bullish on Ethereum or knows the Ethereum story knows about Consensys. And you probably, whether you know the tech or not, you might understand the difference between optimistic rollups and zero knowledge proofs or the ZK EVM stack. Vitalik is clearly leaning into that ZK EVM stack. And I mean, if Joe Lubin is also pushing it and spent however many millions of dollars they've spent over the years perfecting this technology because it's hard, that is really the sort of the broader or the bigger sort of story, right? But what's key for Linea is that they had these products, but they didn't have a means of scaling, and they didn't have a means of sort of growing the ecosystem. So whereas other ecosystems might simply say, oh, we're just going to throw some rewards on a Merkle front end to support Uniswap, or we're going to just simply bribe LPs. What we sort of looked at was to say, hey, look, we know how the MetaDex can be the primary engine that supports the growth of an entire ecosystem. And we use things like Aerodrome as a base case for that. And again, Alexander is one of the advisors to the kingdom, to our sort of, parent sort of group. And so we know very well how that process sort of played out and how effective that can be. The key thing was, as I talked about before, we had that foundation alignment, that shared belief that we could use the MetaDex to do this. And so Etherex became the primary means to scale Linea. So if you want to grow your transactions per second, you want to grow your use case, you want to get more people to come into DeFi, then the DEX, i.e. Etherex in this instance, is the key to doing that. And so that was the key thing we wanted to fill. Now, as part of that, there's different ways to do it. And you'll see there's always incentives that go into different coins, et cetera, to incentivize trading. There's all sorts of different programs. But the base case, the absolute crux of the whole thing is that the foundation needs to make money, needs to profit from all the volume that's been generated on its chain, right? You can't have a system where it's just hoping or, just not getting enough of it. Obviously, they get the sequence of fees, but all the rest of the fees and volume that are happening with the different coins, they need a means of collecting that. And they need a means of incentivizing productive liquidity. In other words, not just meme coins that aren't going to last more than one cycle. Things like how do you get USDC ETH? How do you get USDT ETH? How do you build MUSD? How do you get all these important sort of tokens that need depth? How do you incentivize them so that traders want to come and start farming on those important assets? And I know, again, it's a long way to talk to this, but what we wanted to fill, the gap we wanted to fill, is to make sure that we could say, okay, USDC ETH is an important asset. We need that to have liquidity and it needs to be profitable for people to farm. How do we do that? And the answer is you have foundation alignment where the foundation controls vote power themselves. In other words, the foundation can direct where emissions go and can decide what to incentivize to grow. Now, I'll talk about a little bit more about that because that might sound a little bit confusing, but the gap we were seeking to fill was to enable them at the cheapest way possible to make it the most profitable for traders, most profitable for LPs and for token holders to fully scale the ecosystem in such a way that has long-term value. And that was the gap we were seeking to fill, and we were doing the MetaDex play to do that. And I can break down that MetaDex play in just a second, but that was the gap we wanted to fill, which is why that foundation alignment is so important for us and for really any means of any large foundation looking to scale.
Now, on the foundational alignment, it kind of harkens back a little bit to kind of like the vote escrow days where
Yep.
you can direct where the emissions and where where the benefits go. Is that how
That's
the
exactly
alignment
right.
works? Okay.
Yeah, it's exactly right. So and in this instance, Linea owns 25%, scaling up to almost, a little below 30% now of the vote power. So what you remember in the old vote escrow is that they would vote to direct emissions, right? Our model is a little bit more advanced because you now have a staked model instead. So XREX and then Rex 3.3. And I'll come back to those in a tick. But that staked model essentially means you can actually now value your locked position. You can leverage against it and you can also sell your locked position without having to go to a third party market. And that's the problem that Aerodrome holders have, right? Or Velo holders or any number of other VNFTs. You can't sell your position, right? And then if you look at a curve, back in the day, you would then have to use some type of wrapper. So whether that was, if you had a Frax or a curve CVX position, which weren't voting positions, or then you had CVX, which was a voting position, but was another token. So there was, derivatives and wrappers and all of them taking fees everywhere, all that kind of stuff. All of that is gone now to a system that is primarily based on very similar to vote escrow. It still is that you stake and you still vote and direct those emissions. And I think this is the key component, hopefully for your listeners. What we worked out is you can bribe the token, you can do all this other stuff with it. The token needs to have value. That emissions token must be valuable because if that's valuable, then users want to come and farm it, and that creates the flywheel. So that's the key part: is that the token itself must have value. We don't want a situation where the token dumps to zero. The token needs to be the value component that enables people to invest in the ecosystem, and that's what we built with the MetaDex. So that's what Rex holders, the Etherex token, that's what Rex holders benefit from, is because there's positive buy pressure on the token every week to really grow the ecosystem.
Now, creating a flywheel like that is not trivial.
No.
Um, how did you guys, you and the team kind of brainstorm that and kind of just map it out? Because this
Yeah.
is, I've had this question with many projects, and creating a flywheel like that is actually really hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
No, that's exactly
and
right.
without having to play like, Ponzonomic games, like creating a good sustainable flywheel that's like based on some level of revenue
Mhm.
is tough.
Yeah. I think it's a really good question. So whereas so Coinbase, to look at, yeah, their example is famous, right? Because everybody can see how much profit, how big the arrow is, and that returns like between 30 and 40% to their voters. What they were able to do is pump, many, many millions in buy pressure because of the fees they could use from Coinbase over the top, right? So they went basically from a much lower baseline up to higher because they had that buy pressure from Coinbase themselves, right? Utilizing their centralized exchange revenue. For us, the flywheel is far more built into the ecosystem from the start. So by us having an initial allocation go through to Linea, they're able to use the fees that they earn and generate to then buy more Rex tokens, right? So I'll break it down a little bit. So let's say, for example, if fees on the DEX in the week are 1 million, you can expect that Linea will be receiving, maybe they vote optimally, maybe they don't, but something like 220 to 250,000 USDC worth of tokens. They can then use that every week and do, although it's up to them, of course, I want to highlight that, to then buy the token directly off the market. So that creates the first part of the pressure because Linea wants to own more of their own ecosystem, right? So they're using the fees that they've collected to then buy back into more of their own ecosystem. The second part to the flywheel, and this is why 3.3 used to be such a big thing, but then of course when 3.3 doesn't work, it all goes downhill, right? The difference here is that we have the wrapper, like as in the wrapped token itself, Rex33. That is the liquid version of the VE token, right? Of what you would know from you'd be familiar from in the past. Rex33 every week votes optimally and then uses all of its revenue, like everything it's collected, to buy more Rex on the market and lock it as well. And it does a little bit of arbitrage between buying more Rex33, but you get my point, right? So you've now got at least a 25% position owned by Linea, at least 25, just under between 25 and 30 at the moment, that votes every week, uses its revenue to buy Rex tokens off the market. You've then got Rex33, which is where most users have their liquidity, that does the same thing. So that buys additional off the market again. And the last part to that is what can you do with your X33, of course, because that continues to promote the utility of having this thing. Is you can now basically lend it out. So you can lend it on Euler, you can lend it on a number of different lending markets and borrow against it. So that's a key component of Rex33 is its composability, and we can talk about that after. But that's kind of like the first step of the flow. I would just
Uh,
add the flywheel has to have it has to work if people believe the ecosystem is going to grow, right? Like you can't just say, Etherex, you're awesome, go and do it. Here's no funding, right? That's not going to work. The funding that was done through Linea was Ignition, so their Ignite campaign. So they had the Linea TGE very recently, quite successful. It's sitting between one point, I think it's like 1.6 billion TVL, value at the moment of market cap, I should say, for the token. And then you've got so that injected a lot of liquidity to the market. We've also got Ignition, which is providing, again, additional rewards to those who want to deposit on Aave or into certain LPs to, again, grow the ecosystem. So you need that, you do need the injection of capital of people to come in, but then that's what enables the flywheel to kickstart. And then when people start to see those outsized returns happening on the Rex tokens and their LPs, then they're more incentivized to come in. So again, a long answer to the question there, but I think hopefully that explains it how the flywheel is designed. What I wanted to highlight there is that why you've got 25% owned by the ecosystem and a huge Rex33, which is like 37% of all voters right now are in Rex33. You've got more than 50% already of all the voting Rex is actively buying more Rex every week, which just means the lock rates are they're out of control. Like the emissions are here, lock rates are at or above or very close to every week. So that flywheel is really sort of kicking in.
Now, let's talk about naming really quick. So when you say
Sure.
Rex 3.3, you're referring to, I think it's the prisoner's dilemma, where 3.3 means the in a game, the players of the game are holding, versus if it's 9.9, where the players in the game are,
Rest it up.
they're all selling. Is that where it comes from?
It does, and so it's the older model, obviously, with Ohm and then Solidly. So Solidly is the old original BNFT 3.3 model, and what that introduced was a bit of friction, right? So it forced the users to have more 3-3, unlike, say, Ohm, for example, because it was
Mhm.
hard to get out of your VNFT. And so everybody was incentivized to hold. And then by holding and locking and voting, you didn't want to miss out on the rewards. And so you kept doing the same, right? In a version of 3-3. For the Rex token, it works slightly differently. So what we removed was the need for the VENFT and instead have Rex 3-3, which you mint from your staked Rex. So the
Mhm.
only way that negative 99 can happen is if people are willing to take, in particular now, a 50% haircut or more on their Rex 3-3 position in order to exit that way and then dump the liquid Rex. Highly unlikely to do that. Right? In particular, when you have positive buy pressure on the Rex token and the Rex 3-3 token itself. So I guess it's a little bit different, and I'm happy to, when your users want to look at tokenomics later, it's genius. But Rex 3-3 is a VNFT that you can sell and use, and is still part of that prisoner's dilemma of 3-3, and it has the positive buy pressure every week. So not being in a staking position actually means you're worse off than those who are just the pure speculators, which is, kind of gets down to that true 3-3 capabilities. You don't want to just be a holder as a speculator. You'd rather be in the liquid voting version of the same thing, and the more that's in that, the more buy pressure there is each week. So it creates that 3-3 by design.
Got it. So on the Etherex website, Etherex is being positioned as the metadex powering liquidity on Linea. Linea. Tell us what metadex is, because that's not a very common term.
No, it's true. And it's, again, made famous by the guys from Aerodrome. I think metadex is what you want it to be because it's undefinable. But really what the key to it is, uh, I like to think of it like this. If you want to invest in an ecosystem, like you want to invest in its fees and volume, then you want to be involved in the meta, like that story, right? And
Hmm.
the DEX that does that is us, right? So think of like you want the linear story, you believe in, Joe Shalom and Joe Lubin bringing more value to Linea and to things happening, then you believe in the meta, the narrative, and this is the DEX that does that. And it does it by essentially you are investing in the future volatility of the token because without a doubt, if there's nobody trading on Linea, if nobody comes to Linea and nobody's there and there's no money flows, nothing, then Rex by definition won't have any, there'll be no fees, there'll be no volume, right? And that's the problem for all dexes. So the metadex is part of the narrative. It's the storyline of that deck, of that ecosystem. And so for us, the metadex is, although a little bit of an outdated term in some ways, to us, it's the storyline dex. So if you believe in the storyline of Linea, the only way to invest in it, to be honest, is either buy Ethereum or buy the XREX token and buy the Rex token or Rex 3 and invest in the future fees that the space is going to be generating. And I think when you look at all the catalysts coming in, it makes sense. So I think that's why the metadex, maybe it's a misleading term, but hopefully by calling it the narrative, it makes it a little bit easier to sort of visualize what we're trying to get across there.
No, I mean with product naming, I mean there's it's more art than science, and I
Yeah.
think metadex is good because it's actually people are familiar with the word meta, and then in crypto people are familiar with the word dex, and so it's memorable.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, they'll get into naming. If I can do one quick one.
yeah.
Etherex itself was the original, right? So like back in 2014, 2015, before Ethereum was like, mainnet was launched, they were talking about how do we do a decentralized exchange? And the very first next name was going to be Etherex. So that
Hmm.
was the plan. And it was a big thing being done by a bunch of people, and Consensys was heavily involved. So when it came time to naming the DEX, Joe Lubin was the one who named it essentially with us and said, what do you want to call it? He said, well, Etherex. Let's get back to the truth of where this all started. And so that's why Etherex has the name that it does. And then the Rex, of course, is the fun part of that because it jumps out of it, right? Etherex, it sounds like a Rex. But that's why it's called that. So absolute OG from, one of the absolute OGs in Ethereum and in crypto, Joe Lubin himself has named us, and that's why it is what it is. So there you go. I thought I'd give you that little aside on naming.
No, that's really good history. That's I'm reminded of Ether Delta. I don't know if you were a user of Ether Delta, but it was absolutely terrible. Um, like people would fat finger things all the time, and I fat fingered things all the time. Um, but yeah, that's another story. Um, so for someone brand new to EtherX, like how do you want them to think about it? Is it an AMM? Is it an order book? Is it a hybrid? And what do they do? Like how do they get involved? Excuse me. You mentioned composability. Tell us about the ecosystem. Like, what can they do when they get involved with Etherex? Like, what else could they do in the broader ecosystem? Maybe take us
Yeah.
through that journey.
I think to cut to the chase, right? So like every user should go through the same process when they get to Etherex. We're an AMM, we're not an order book, so it's an AMM, and it's got a focus on two pools, very similar to Uniswap, right? So V2 pools and then CL pools or V3 pools, right? So V2 and V3. Those pools active, well, in particular the V3, which is almost all the volume goes through the concentrated liquidity pools, right? If you want to farm in those pools, i.e., if you want to earn Rex tokens, you need to be on your game. You need to have a knowledge of basically how CL works, concentrated liquidity works, because you're competing against other farmers.
Hmm.
If you're happy to take a wider range, you can do that. And I would suggest that everyone plays around with it. But what happens is, after time, everyone realizes that, man, I just keep losing out to these professional farmers, these guys who know what they're doing. And this is what happens to most retail users, right? Is they keep missing out on the best returns. But the way our model is designed is you don't miss out because you get to collect the fees. So I guess if you're a user, think of it like this. In Uniswap, everyone is competing to get those fees. With us, people are competing to get the emissions that you as a voter will emit to them, right? So you actually create a partnership between the token holders and the LPs. So if you're not comfortable in how to deposit, for example, into a concentrated liquidity pool, be that on some volatile assets or any number of assets, if you're not comfortable in how to do that, the easiest way to earn the fees is to simply buy Rex, lock it into XREX, or just simply buy Rex 33, and it does it for you. So you're automatically part of the ecosystem. You're already part of that meta, that broader narrative. So, you know, NFA always, but like if you want to, like I meant it when I said the meta, the narrative for Linea is Etherex itself and the Etherex ecosystem, like the Rex token, which is the emissions token, but XREX to vote and Rex33, which auto votes for you, is the best way to do it. It's kind of like that, there's the curve, right? So like I should just buy a Rex33. I want to do like really complicated CL and earn Rex and lock it myself versus just buy Rex33. Between I don't know, what I mean, the bell curve thing they show you with the smooth brain and the genius.
Oh
To
yeah,
be
yeah.
honest with you,
Yeah.
you'll end up at Rex33 because unless you're a professional farmer, you'll end up there. It's just the easiest way to do it, and then you can leave it to the larger capital allocators. And I would say if you're bullish that you think SBET capital is coming, and you think that there's a lot of Ethereum coming and a lot of other deep liquidity coming, then it's going to be very hard to compete with those professional market makers and professional LP providers, liquidity providers. And if you can, and I think you should try, but you should also try to work out how do I work in partnership with them. And you do that by owning Rex33, where you get their fees and they get your emissions. Simple as that.
Is it as a capital allocator? You know, there's various types, right? There's some that want to be more active and those that are more passive. It feels like a participant in Etherex in the Etherex ecosystem. You need to be active. Is that am I thinking about that wrong or?
So yes and no, right? Like if you are a CL provider, as in you're providing liquidity in a CL pool, I think it behooves you, I think you say in the States, to be active, right? Because you can readjust your positions before they're extensively out of range. You'll experience too much IL or realized loss, right? Once it happens. So I think in that instance, yes. If you're a capital allocator who's happy farming stables, you can provide a fairly wide LP on a number of stable coins, and you'll earn excellent percentages between 4 and up to 12, sometimes 20% if you're
Hmm.
lucky on MUSD, for example. And so you can earn quite attractive yields as a capital allocator there. The same can be said for CL positions on ETH pairs. So if you're looking at Easy ETH in particular from Renzo and or Wrap Staked ETH from Lido, and they're paired against ETH, you can set a fairly wide range and earn a comfortable 6 to 8%. So in other words, better than your staking yield on two assets that are really relatively safe, right? So that is one big way to do it as a capital allocator, in particular available capital. If, however, you want to go on more volatile assets, yes, you need to be active. If you want to invest in the ecosystem, like I said before, as a retail participant, you don't need to be so active. Because if you're XREX, you have to vote every week. That's the manual way of doing it. But Rex33, it auto votes for you and it auto compounds for you. So all you have to do is buy it and hold it. You don't have to do anything else with it. So you hold your X33 and that's it. It's automatically doing it for you. So in that instance, you can be quite inactive, I should say, not inactive, and let those rewards sort of auto compound for you over time. And then as more DeFi integrations come in, you can deposit it in Euler, borrow USDC against it, farm that a little bit if you want to, or use it to, I don't know, pay for dinner, whatever else you want to do. Borrow MUSD and spend it on your MetaMask card, to shamelessly shield the MetaMask card there. But you can do any of those things, I guess. So I guess to answer that question, it would be you can be as active as you want to in our
Yeah.
ecosystem. You can either be heavily involved as an active farmer and a dedicated voter, or you can simply just simply get Rex 3 and have some wider positions and then be relatively passive as an investor.
No, I think that's quite attractive, and it meets the needs of all types of investors
That's
or
exactly right.
participants, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk about the ecosystem. You've mentioned Euler a couple of times, and other DeFi projects also. And these ecosystems typically, just for the audience, they grow. Um, capital bridges into the ecosystem. So in this case, from another ecosystem that's bridged into Linea, and then you can participate on Etherex. But then what do you do after that? Because that's capital coming in, but in the broader ecosystem, how does Etherex work with other DeFi projects using composability?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, up until very recently, Astera was quite a large player in that department, but we won't go through that now. They're dealing with some exploit issues at the moment. But so Euler integration is a vault curated by RE7. So again, very large firms there. And what you can do is you can grab your Rex 3, you can deposit in there and then borrow against it to then farm more on Etherex if you like.
Hmm.
If you're coming across just in Linea and want something very low risk, you can deposit into Aave. Aave has, I think, just under $1 billion in TVL on Linea at the moment. So significant inflows in the last little while. And that's a lot of people who are looking forward to the Ignition campaign and how that's currently sort of playing out. And Ignition is happening now.
Yeah.
And so that's another one. You can clear deposit there. Go ahead.
Yeah, maybe we can talk about um, so as you're looking at different projects to work with. So let's pick Euler. Um, how do you what does that business development kind of relationship start? What do you guys talk about? How do you actually integrate? What does that
Indeed.
conversation look like?
Rock and roll. Yeah, yes. It's good. That's the good stuff. That's what we do most of the time, right? So to be honest, it's a lot easier than it used to be because everybody likes Linea now and everybody wants to get involved in the Linea
That's good.
ecosystem. So business development is good. But basically, what it looks like is ecosystems will have their plan for how they want to increase their liquidity. And let's say it's like an LIT, for example. They want deeper deposits. And so they'll look at having a lending market. They'll go to Aave and make sure that's set up. But then they'll come to us and talk about, we'd like to set up a pool. So we will talk about what kind of pool to set up. Then we'll talk about, is there an opportunity for co-incentives? In particular, can they get support from Linea's vote power? And they'll also look at how do they provide incentives to get additional deposits in their LPs. So that's what most of the conversations look like. There are a lot of other integrations, of course. There's a lot of bridging protocols and other sort of protocols who want access to the front end on Etherex. And our answer to that is no. We want to remain as clean a DEX as possible, but we're happy to be integrated. We just won't put it on the front end. And then the other group you see a lot of is, of course, new meme coin launches and new sort of culture coins, all that type of stuff, who want to get involved as well. What that looks like, and this is, I guess, a good one to talk through, is they will turn up and usually have a pocket full of dreams and not a whole lot of capital. And their goal is to grow their ecosystem using us, right? Using our front end to get more visibility to their coin. For us, we don't do that straight away. So our system is essentially you can jump on, but what you do is you don't get a gauge, right? So you can set up your pool permissionlessly. You can have the Peter coin if you want to paired against ETH, or I can have the Trantor coin. But until it's starting to generate volume and productive liquidity, like people who really want this coin, the people who deposit in there will just get the fees. So they won't be part of the Rex flywheel that I talked about before. They won't be part of all that. They're still there. You can still trade it on our front end. There's no issues there. We'll support all that kind of stuff, but they won't be getting the emissions. When the volume picks up, that's when we start to look at them having a gauge and getting emissions and then being part of the broader ecosystem. So I guess what I'm saying there is that highly extractive liquidity that's just seeking to farm us based on shitcoins is not something we do, and we prevent that by not allocating, not whitelisting the token and not allocating them a gauge, which are the two sort of key parts. So that's kind of the main stuff, and then the rest of VD, to be honest with you, is convincing the big players to come across the Linea. And that's an easy sell too, because almost everyone you can think of in DeFi is actively coming across. I can't talk about all of them, but they're all either coming across or looking at coming to Linea because the ZK EVM narrative is the narrative. That's what that's what Vitalik's talking about. That's what's being spoken about at every one of these major conferences, and will happen at Dev Connect, and I'm sure it's happening in London right now. Everyone's talking Linea and ZK EVM and the tech stack. So that's again, so it's an easier BD and business development sell than than it has been in the past.
Well, we'll get into ZK VM for sure. You mentioned that at one point, not a lot of projects were coming across to go to the Linea ecosystem, but now like everyone wants to. And I guess maybe give us a contrast of like at that point, like how that felt and like how it feels now, where you're probably overwhelmed with lots of business development kind of discussions. It's a good
So
problem
I
to
think,
have. I'm
yeah,
saying.
it's a great problem to have, right? So I think it went from being, and this is from a business, it goes from being like, hey, Trantor, I need you to focus on these three other things as well, to hey, focus on one. And I guess that moment before something happens shakes your belief in an ecosystem because the road to being one of the biggest L2s out there is littered with the dead of some of these terrible L2s out there.
Hmm.
And we experienced Scroll. We were part of the Scroll as the kingdom was. We're part of the Scroll sort of launch and fiasco. We've had dexes that just were just part of ecosystems that just never grew. And so there's that doubt that seeps in there when things aren't happening. But I think the thing that meant that, no matter what else we were focusing on, no matter what else I was focused on, Linea was always a big part of it, was the Consensys storyline. Because it was just an unbreakable narrative. It's just like
Yeah.
there's no way Consensys is going to zero. You know what I mean? And Linea is their ecosystem. So I guess that gave us just that little bit of hope, even when things were looking pretty lousy, to stick with it. And as I said, we were building another ecosystem so that we were able to come back in. And now that things are really moving on, it's an exciting time, but it's really heads down because Linea has a lot of things in the pipeline and it's building up some good narrative, but it's only delivered on two of them so far. So it's delivered on Etherex, us, and obviously I control our destiny in that department, which is good, and it's delivered on the Linea TGE. So that's happening too. There are other campaigns like Ignition that's happening, but that's just points at the moment. Native staking is coming. You've got so many other bullish things: Mask token, DIN token, all these other great things that are coming out in the next little while. But only two have happened so far. So all the rest of that bull narrative is still to come, which is exciting. But it's also one of those things where making sure the market doesn't lose sight of who we are becomes a big part of what's happening, because sometimes the market has a 5-minute attention span, and it's too busy watching big whales get liquidated on hyperliquid and arguing about order books than it is about longer term ecosystem growth. So I guess that's what we're looking at now, is reminding the market that hey, this is a real ecosystem that's going to be here. If you want to invest for the long term in Ethereum, this is the place. So that's really how our emotion is shifted to that, rather than begging partners to come along.
Yeah. I asked that question because I was in a similar position. I
Oh,
was
yeah.
at Harmony with I led growth at Harmony at one point,
Ah,
and Harmony at one point was kind of a big deal, but
yeah, I
not so
remember.
much anymore. But I remember I joined Harmony, and we were the quintessential dead chain. Like there were no applications being built on us. And so my goal was, well, we need to get applications. We need to like meet the needs of developers, and we need to grow this thing. And it was actually a really, really hard thing to grow an ecosystem. But
Yeah,
we got very lucky. And it took one application to take off, and it literally created a fire. And that application, they're still around, but they're not a really big deal anymore. It was DeFi Kingdoms. And it was really just DeFi Kingdoms was like a DEX, but it was kind of skinned as a game, and it was gamified. It was actually really fun. But that created a fire, and we noticed on our bridge, like so much capital was being bridged over so that people could participate on DeFi Kingdoms, and it actually took us by surprise because when we met with the DeFi Kingdoms team, it didn't seem like a big deal to us,
yeah,
but
yeah,
it turned out to be a massive deal.
yeah.
And so it was like
It
we
hit
had
whatever
over,
it was at the market. Yeah,
yeah, it was crazy. It was also really good timing. We had over $1 billion bridged to Harmony from these other ecosystems. And then everyone was contacting us. Sushi contacted us, Uniswap contacted. Like all of a sudden, it was like, wow, like this is really really cool.
Yeah.
To contrast that prior to DeFi Kingdoms, it was really it was just an uphill battle. And so it
Yeah.
really just takes kind of one thing and it just takes off. And,
Yeah.
it's like slow, slow, slow. And then all of a sudden it's
And
like
then all of a
really,
sudden,
really fast. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
sounds like that's where you guys are now.
Well, it's a good point. You actually, I'm reflecting on that a little bit. So we've had this discussion too. What is the other app? Because Hyperliquid's big. I mean, perps are big, and then prediction markets are big, and yeah, some of them are coming across in various things. But maybe I don't know. Like, I like to think that Etherex can be the app, to be honest with you, because it can be the place. But people will then say, well, "What do I do there?" And the answer is, well, you provide liquidity and farm, right? So it comes back to what are people chasing, and there's an element back then, as you said, I think, when people were chasing games and gamified experiences. For the DeFi kingdoms, are they chasing yields now? I think quite a few people are. There's a lot more professionals chasing yield. So I think that will become something for serious people, and Etherex becomes a place for that. But who knows? Maybe there's another killer app. Maybe it's
Yeah.
the next token. Maybe it's the master token, right? That's going to be the next big catalyst that really gets people going. So yeah,
That's going
it's
to be
exciting, though.
exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no,
I
for
mean, people
sure.
have been asking about the mass token forever. So it's
Yep,
finally,
yep.
yeah, I guess we'll see.
Uh,
I'll tell you something that I'm seeing that might be helpful as you guys consider like how you grow the ecosystem. I'm
sure.
seeing, perps dexes, of course, are very popular, right? But what I'm seeing is kind of verticalizing. Uh, Projects are verticalizing the perp dex.
Mhm.
So it's a perp dex plus spot plus some element of lending, and so you're able to create a position where you borrow something and then do a perps trade and then pay it back right away. So it's like that kind of strategy is we've never really seen that because there
Mm,
is no perp dex that's vertically integrated like that yet.
mm.
But I know of several projects that are starting to do that, and so they're kind of verticalizing like in a stack,
Yeah, right.
spot perps, borrow, and other services too. And so it's going to be very interesting as we see more of these. And as I think of
Mm,
Etherex, I wonder if there's an opportunity there with maybe with maybe with the emissions. Like, maybe that can be part of your capital base that then you can use to invest or
absolutely.
trade or
Yeah, yeah.
something like that. I mean, there's
It's so
someone
composable.
will come up
Like,
with something.
yeah. In fact, straight after this, you can send me some of those contacts because it is always interesting to have these discussions. And without being silly, it's because those positions can be used in a number of ways, whatever the token is they're using as the primary means to get into the perp or whatever else. All of those can be traded directly through us. Maybe some liquidations come through us as well, done in certain ways. Certain pools collateralized in different ways. Rex33 is used. The composability is endless when it comes to Etherex and to working with, I guess, with the perp with anyone, right? So
Mhm.
that's what we like about this system. So yeah, I mean, A, hook me up afterwards, and B, yes, I think that's the advantage of having Rex33 is it's composable, is we can use it any number of ways, and it's an interest-bearing, yield generating token. So
Yeah.
it has that advantage to it, which is always good for the DeFi Lego system, right? So yeah, but yeah, I'm interested to hear that because whether it's Flying Tulip's going to steal all the air out of the room with Sonic, or it's going to be something else, I guess we'll see, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm hoping it's one of these other builders. But, yeah,
I
we'll
want
talk
to talk about
after.
two more topics.
Yeah,
So I
sure.
want to talk about ZK, and then I want to talk about community. I'm on the Etherex website, and it looks like the events page is like full of events.
Mhm.
And so I'm curious about that and how you guys approach community because you guys seem like a really fun community. But let's start with ZK. Tell us about like the
Sure.
role of ZK in Etherex and Linea.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, it's the fundamental stack of Linea. So, I'll always, I will always allow someone from Linea to do it because it's a complicated structure. And I even tried to
Mm.
watch some of the video a little while ago, and I think my wife fell asleep in the 5 minute video because it was far too technical. And it's because I don't know it either. But the key part to us on the ZK is that is considered to be the future because it provides actual finality rather than the assumption of it, right? So, the difficult part now for the ZK piece is that its finality is still being built in because there was a bit of technical backlog to catch up on, to catch up to where Ethereum really was, right, over the last little while. But the ZK AVM stack that Linea has built has pretty much caught up now, and this sort of Petra upgrade will be very soon, which means that it'll be not only is it basically already fully composable with Ethereum, but things will be moving much faster and much more efficiently. What it means, and this is the part that I think for those who wonder and worry about the ZK AVM stack, the ZK AVM stack is still growing and still getting better and is the future of Ethereum scaling. That's key, right? And that's been told to us by many people. And Vitalik himself, like if the Ethereum Foundation is pushing and loving it, then that's a pretty good indication. But what it means at the moment is that a number of exchanges don't recognize the finality of ZK AVM until I think it's like between up to 4 hours, sometimes 4 to 6 hours. Whereas optimistic roll-ups, because of the way the market has been sort of sold from a business development case and led in many ways by Coinbase, they assume that everything is fine and they allow that sex to dex arbitrage. And that increases volume no end because market makers are able to then arbitrage between the two. And so for that reason, for the next couple of months, in fact, it's probably the next month and a half, that volumes between centralized exchanges and decentralized exchanges onto Linea is less, unless it's a specific token, like the Linea token, than it otherwise could be. But as these upgrades happen in the next little while, and I'm talking like this year, like imminently, and we're already in October, right? As these upgrades happen and finality is increased, then you can start to see a lot more of that arbitrage happening between centralized exchanges and decentralized exchanges. So volumes are able to pick up significantly. Same can be said though for if you look at Swift payments or you look at any others, ZKAVM provides actual finality, which is what they need to be able to move funds around. Like it's an actual finality rather than the optimistic roll-off. So again, it's an ecosystem that has all the legs in the future. It just takes a little bit longer to build it correctly, which is what's being done by Linea now. And it's again, the spearhead is really what Consensys is doing. But again, for other technical stuff, I'll get Declan or Arthur to come on here and talk to you at a different time because they know certainly it's a labor of love for them to be building it. But yeah, it's a tech stack that I mostly get, and we're glad to be a part of the narrative really that is winning out.
I've met with lots of ZK projects, and it feels like there's this movement now. ZK's been around for 30 some years, but it feels like now is like the right time. And I've met with lots of ZK projects, and they're all approaching ZK in a different way. You've got one that are kind of focused on applications. You've got one that wants to be enshrined on the layer on the main chain, but available to all the applications on that chain. Is kind of two different approaches. And then you've got one that is kind of more modular and just has a different approach. And so it just feels like now's like the right time. What do you think?
Look, I mean, yes, purely based on the business development that I'm seeing. So that's why I say it's the right time. So and not based on anything else, because again, I speak to the guys from Linea who've been building this. They're a bit more relaxed now. They're a bit more confident in where they're going. They're like, oh, things are happening. Things are falling into place. We're about to catch up to everything else that needs to be done. And as I said, everybody wants to come across to Linea to get involved in what's happening here, and we're getting all that foundation support. So from a feelings perspective, it feels the same. Like I feel there's that narrative shift. But the problem with day to day is you don't, like in crypto, unless the price goes up parabolic, you don't feel shit. You're just waiting for stuff to happen. So I think from a broader momentum perspective, yes. Can I put my finger on when that's going to happen? I would say, I think similar to you, right? Like, I don't know, like the momentum is there, it's happening. What will be the catalyst? I don't know. Maybe it could be the Mars token for all I know. It could be DIN token. It could be the decentralized treasuries. Sorry, the digital asset treasuries deploying on chain. It could be any number of things that does it. And when I say the catalyst, I mean for retail to recognize, no, that's where we want to be. And potentially, it'll be an institution doing the same thing. So yeah, I don't know what the catalyst is going to be, whether it comes from the retail or the insto side. It's usually actually it could be from both, right? So yeah, I guess that's sort of my take to it. I mean, does that sort of resonate with what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of really great experimentation, and I think one meta that I really, really appreciate is kind of a less of a focus on infrastructure and more on actual users, applications and users. And I think that's super healthy for crypto in general. I think we have been way too focused on the infra side and not so much on user experience, and really applications. But I feel that shift is happening, and I think it's a really good one.
Yeah, yeah, that's a fair statement.
Let's shift to the community. So I'm on the
Uh-huh.
events page, and I'm seeing a Halloween bash here. I'm seeing in esports. I mean, it feels like it's you guys are doing a lot in the community. Tell us kind of like
Yeah, so
the
look, it's
your
like it's
philosophy on
linear,
that.
linear push. A lot of community stuff to grow. For Etherex, the community is it's a real mix, right? So our community has got a lot of eFrogs types in there, and a lot of foxes in there, and a few other sort of meme coins that are going around because those communities have been going for a long while. And Etherex became the thing they could hang their hat on and go, hold on, the ecosystem is working, we're good, and they could be part of it, right? But in terms of events, our approach from an Etherex perspective is more person to person in a way. So, like,
Hmm.
I'll do a weekly show, the Rex Weekly, and that's essentially where I just give my take and updates on what's happening. So it's a direct sort of, you can speak to the CEO and understand what's happening. And then the community themselves are a real mix. There's some really really intelligent DeFi players, across the kingdom, but in particular in Etherex, who really know deep on tokenomics. They understand best ways to farm, best ways for things to play out, and a really
Hmm.
interesting community there. And then we've also got meme coiners who just love to be involved. So you've got that real mix. Linea themselves, I mean, Etherex is now a big part of it, and the community that they're trying to do, they're trying to have these fun activities and fun things that to sort of build the engagement because it's a fun team. And the guys from Linea, I mean, nothing sounds less fun than talking about ZK but they have a good marketing element and a good team who push these things. And then, we've recently hired a large marketing firm as well who are helping us now. And you can see some videos of things rolling out, with the Rex talking to people and, talking about the digital asset treasury and really our new focus, which is to be the treasury standard for Ethereum. So that's all happening from not only marketing but also building out that community of believers, whether they be meme coiners or serious DeFi types, bringing everybody together.
Yeah. Trantor, is there anything that you want to talk about that we haven't talked about yet?
Look, I think the bull case for Linea, and I'll give you the 30-second piece because it's something that I think the market can do it at once, right? And the market doubts Consensys's ability maybe to pull it off. I don't know. Maybe they doubt Linea's ability to pull it off. But if you look at the milestones that are coming up, and I don't control all these, so I'll just give you, Trantor's take on it. But the ecosystem needed to set up infrastructure. And when I say infrastructure, I don't mean the stuff we were talking about before, but it needed to have things in place. And Etherex was the thing in place to help capture the feed. That's it. Linea TGE, many years promised. That's been done now. Things are moving along. It's good. The big steps, though, that really are going to make Linea work, not only are its technology, but also native staking, which means essentially any Ethereum that's on the chain is automatically staked on mainnet and is earning yield, which is then used in DeFi on Linea. So we're talking significantly more yield in a sustainable manner that's coming back. You've got the deployment of, and again, I don't control this, but digital asset treasuries coming across onto Linea, and then you've got the trust being shown by Swift in particular to use the Linea ZKVM stack as well, for all their cross-border payments. With all of that sort of trust and capability happening, and then you look at bullish retail type events like the DIN token followed by the master token. There's a lot of catalysts that are all bullish catalysts on the horizon for Linea, and Linea also happens to be part of a multi-cycle company that isn't going anywhere. I think that just puts a really good bull case on it. And so at the moment, we sort of laugh that people are sleeping on the ecosystem because voters are earning 79%, 85% yields on their X33 fully composable token, double what you would be earning on your B Arrow. And yet the market just, I guess, hasn't caught it yet or doesn't believe. So you can take a look yourself. I encourage users to take a look and ask questions. It is more composable, and if you don't like the ecosystem, unlike with Vero, where you have to go on other markets, if you don't end up liking it or have some other issue, you can actually sell your position in Rex33 if you're so inclined, because it's fully composable. So you're not locked into 4 years. You can do things like you should be able to in DeFi and move your capital as you want to. So and the bullish thesis to me is such an easy sell. I'm hoping at the end of this, Peter, that of course you and I'll be DMing as we can talk about how you get more involved in the ecosystem, because it is such an easy sell when I get the chance to go through it. So I do want to say thanks for your time, and B, if you have any questions or anyone has any questions, always reach out to us on Discord.
You got it. Well, Trantor, thank you so much. This has been a really great conversation. And I will share all of the URLs and all of the show notes so that people can learn more about Etherex and participate.
Sounds
Thank you
good.
so much.
Thanks very much. Thanks for your time.